I will hit record. Perfect. Okay, so what I think for today, I guess like first maybe just a bit of discussion on like goals and what we hope to achieve. So I don't expect us to like solve SimPEG governance in the next hour. This is much more meant to like kick off the conversation and see if we're kind of on the right page or on the same page. Structure, I haven't thought too in depth, but as per Dieter's suggestion, maybe just kind of like going through the document that we've got started and kind of chat about things if there's things that people want to raise discussion points on and kind of go through. I don't know if anyone has other thoughts on how to start.
That works. Got to start somewhere. So
okay, that sounds good. Then I guess, is it worth me just like sharing my screen? Is that the easiest way to do this?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. Let me get the clutter off of here. Okay. Actually, let me even just maximize that. See if that works. Can you see that all? Is that big enough?
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, so I guess the first thing kind of thinking through is why should we formalize governance? And these were just like a few thoughts I put down. Has everyone here like read through this? If we sort of skimmed, does that work? Or do we want to kind of just like take a moment and read?
Yeah,
I had a quick read through it.
Okay.
Yeah, I read through it.
Okay.
Then go ahead. I'll read now.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, so I guess if a few of the bigger picture things is kind of thinking through like recognizing what responsibilities people have and making that a bit more explicit, as well as acknowledging contributions. So I've even found, when like applying for grant funding and things like that, like how do I talk about what I do in SimPEG? And we haven't really decided on that. So it like makes it kind of awkward. And so I think, defining some of those things. Figuring out like where to point new users and contributors is like who's their point of contact depending on what they're interested in doing, and who kind of has a bit of perhaps elevated responsibility. I mean, again, it's still like we are an open source project. These are volunteer roles. It's not like we want to be strapping extra responsibility onto folks, but in a sense, like if you are kind of a core contributor, there is a bit more responsibility with that. And so making that explicit. Again, not like my goal here is not to like add burden to anyone. It's much more to define where those responsibilities are and who is willing to take them on. So then I broke out the strategies for code and community, I think is two different things that are both important, that both sort of take different skill sets and thought that goes into them, is figuring out how do we sort of evolve and prioritize in development. So far we do that all through the meetings, but I guess like who's kind of responsible for keeping that in mind, coming to the meetings each week, thinking about that longer term vision, as opposed to like to balance out, I guess, sort of the immediate needs of any given project. Same thing for community, is how do we want to be reaching out to other folks? Who else should we be engaging? How do we make sure that it stays a healthy and positive community, and I also identifying things that we should be improving. And being able to hold those conversations and surface some of those challenges. I think one of the important things about formalizing governance is decisions when there's competing priorities. So when there is a point of conflict and a decision needs to be made, the governance model should help answer that. I mean, hopefully that these events are rare, but we want to have a process if they do come up, and not sort of be deciding both of those things on the fly, because that is a recipe for disaster. So, hey, Sagi.
I'm sorry for late.
No worries. Thanks for joining. We're just kind of reading through the document now, and we'll sort of pause and prompt discussion. So yeah, feel free to jump in. And I guess another point, and this has sort of come up when I actually started looking into paying for Slack, is like the question of who pays for Slack and where do those funds come from? How's that acknowledged? Things like the website and hosting data, like right now, the Google storage bucket is on Rowan's credit card. It's not like a huge expense, but at the same time, like, should he actually be personally paying for that? Probably not. And so, yeah, so those kinds of like perhaps more mundane but important decisions, because we don't want people paying out of pocket for Slack, for example. That's not okay.
What's the total cost roughly, Lindsay?
For Slack or
for everything, all expenses of SimPEG, you know, what's the overhead?
So I think that's a good question. I don't have the number off the top of my head. I think for like the website, so like the domain purchase is probably $50 or $20 to $50 annually. Not quite 50, probably around the $20 mark annually. The hosting on Google Cloud of storage and everything like that, I think is on the order of like $7 a month or something like that. And then if we do decide to upgrade Slack, that's a non-trivial expense. I think ballpark 500 a year was kind of with the discount if we're able to get it, with how many users we have. So none of those are huge. And I can double check those values.
Sorry, what was the 500 for? Because
So
we
we're
went
not,
from $100 to $600.
Yeah, no, so we're not paying for Slack right now. If
Yeah.
we were to pay for Slack to be able to get our data and those sorts of things, that's around the ballpark that it would
Oh,
cover.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And then same thing, like sort of thinking down the road for like Zoom, for example. I mean, right now everybody's getting it for free through universities, but that might not be the case when the world hopefully goes back to some sense of normalcy. So
yeah, and I think it's not just that probably not Rowan should pay for it, but it's also for, or anyone else, but also for stability. What if someone suddenly changes credit card, it stops paying because he can't anymore?
Yeah,
it would be more stable if it's kind of from
completely
a research group or an organization, or I don't even know what all the possibilities would be, because NGO is kind of a big hurdle to do. There must be in betweens, right? Like educational.
There is an educational one, and actually in some senses, and this is a discussion we can dive into further later, but I don't think we need to go into too much detail here. I was kind of thinking, I suspect it will be much easier. Well, there's two things we could do. Is one, we could apply through GIF and just say it serves the research group, and that's the main thing, or the main sort of educational avenue there. And I think that would be fine. And it would probably go through.
Are you going to take over the GIF brand when you go back to UBC, Lens?
Not entirely sure yet. I think that like there will be some of that. There's a question of like, does it sort of morph into something different? Do I just adopt that? But there'll be some blending of that in some senses, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you have to get rid of the name. You just might not have more consortiums.
Yeah.
Just geophysics, right? Depends what if Lindsay wants to focus, geophysics or not.
Yeah, and sort of bringing in the data science element is something I'd like to do. And so if that's under the GIF umbrella or like part of, we haven't figured that out, but
yeah, that umbrella is too small for you, Lindsay.
no.
Need a parachute.
A parachute, fair enough. And I think Doug just jumped in too. Hey, Doug.
Sorry, guys,
No worries.
I can only handle one thing at a time. It seems a lot of stuff going on. Yeah, so
My Wi-Fi keeps failing, so I might just vanish.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, so these are like some of the high level things that we're sort of thinking about with respect to governance. Are there any things you think are missing from this list? Are there descriptions you think are missing? Do you want to share your thoughts on this? I'll stop talking for a moment.
I would maybe like to add a point under the first point that doesn't probably belong until under the governance, but I think when I started with SimPEG, it would have helped me a lot. Is if you write, maybe it exists somewhere, but maybe an A4 page of a bit the history, like who started with SimPEG, who I looked at the Git history, but yeah, what was the reason? And then this could give a lot of insight about why things are the way they are, like naming and conventions. And then I think later looking and reading a bit the book by Haber, I don't know how you pronounce him, and look at his exercises, I think realize that probably a lot comes from there, and just give some history, who started, why, because also the one of the first contributors was this lady that I think that was in the computational group. What is she called? I don't know her.
Lose probably.
Yes, and so just kind of, yeah, what are kind of the roots and how did it came to what it is? Because it would, I think for new ones, it would a bit help to understand some of the reasoning and design decisions and why do things work the way it worked, that is maybe clear for Sogi and Lindsay and Rowan, because they always worked with that, but it's not so clear for someone not from UBC.
I guess in some ways, I feel that's the kind of the responsibility of the landing page for some of these websites is I'm a new person, I know nothing. What's the first thing that I need to understand when I arrive here? And then we point to other places. One of the things is like getting started for developers. And then you can go down that avenue. So, I mean, maybe some edits and improvements could be made to that content, but that's sort of where I thought it should live.
Yeah, maybe already under a subsection of contributors. Yeah, info to contributors, something like.
Hmm.
Yeah. Because I think on the landing page should be much more user focused.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
That's smart.
Yeah, so that was just something because you have there about it goes a bit into acknowledging contributions just in a backwards fashion, and it probably doesn't have to go to governance. It's just something that could be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Also, in 10 years when you're going to write the history of SimPEG, you can take that out again.
Good point.
So one thing I think I'd be interested to talk about is the strategy for the code. You know, it's kind of developed in a very organic kind of a way, and I think one of the issues we face is kind of stability versus new stuff. Like, yeah, like a core of stable core stuff versus bringing in new stuff all the time, and keeping that kind of balance of really well documented core stuff. It's not going to change much. So what's kind of the balance between that?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we want to tackle that? You know, obviously bringing in new stuff is always more exciting than stabilizing old stuff, perhaps, but it's kind of got to get done, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That's totally fair, and I think that comes into, you know, what's our mission, you know, what's our, you know, 5-year plan for the code, basically.
Exactly.
And if we can fix that, then I think that will kind of crystallize the parts that needs to be stabilized.
Yeah, exactly. So what do we want the code to be doing? What are the core parts of that? You know, where are they at on their journey towards being like a version 1 or a version 2 kind of thing.
I might just ask you to mute. I think we have a vacuum or something like that. Thanks.
Yeah, so just some thought around, I guess, what is our vision for the code in the long term, and where are parts of that along that kind of journey?
If I might add a thoughts on that, I'm just thinking of you, Dom, and with Mira, is that as a GeoSoft analyst is using more and more SimPEG, you will probably want to have something stable, or like maybe just call. I think the versioning is nice for that, because like we can just call like a specific version of SimPEG, and within GeoSoft analyst you can update which version you call when things become stable more. But yeah, that's I think the stability will come,
right? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the stability will be really something cool. Like if you want like more like is the industry using it, because they might not have someone internally that will be always keeping up and updating and following the change.
Yeah.
The other extreme, though, is what I can see, like what I hope not to happen is, let's say, like some of the other faculties like use SimPEG as an engine, but don't feed back into the main code base. Because I think I can easily see that could happen. That might happen already. Like this group, Georgia's group. I think they're trying to bring this in, but this process is actually not trivial. And I mean, as a PhD student or researcher, their goal is writing a paper, getting their research done. So yeah, we need some sort of like a strategy to promote that, bring that back in their development as well.
But that's maybe just something, you can promote, because that's a problem of the whole open source community. Complaining, Debian complaining, Ubuntu is not feeding upstream, Red Hat complaining, the other one is not. Yeah, I don't think we should lose our sleep over that. It's something we should promote and push, but if not, then we chose an open source license, so we cannot ask it back unless we take GPL, and then no one would use it, and then.
Well, I mean, one thing that could be beneficial, and that maybe I could do in the near future, is to make the step-by-step process for doing this. Right now, we have all the pieces like, this is how you should name variables, and this is how you should name classes, and this is how we want you to do your doc strings, and this is the process for bringing your stuff in if you want to merge it. We have that stuff kind of in there, but it would be nice to have it as like a very explicit step-by-step process, because that just seems to be how human brains work. So you could say you've branched off of SimPEG, you did some cool stuff. What's your first step? Okay, make sure that you've named your variable, like you have it according to this. Okay, now, so you could just kind of go down the list, and once you've completed the list, ideally you would have something that could be merged into SimPEG. That might be one thing we could do.
I agree, Dev, and I guess all the linters that exist out there, the code checking could possibly do this. But I have the feeling that we need to treat the pull requests and the people. For instance, right now, right, Xiaolong his stuff has been there for 2 weeks, and I don't think anyone looked at it, and that's not good for to encourage collaboration, because if their stuff is sitting there for too long with no one looking at it, then it's discouraging, right? We should, as a group, we should try our best to treat those pull requests as high interest as our own stuff. And I know it's hard, like myself included, it's not a priority, but I think as terms of like a team or like, a mission, we should try to improve.
So I think that's where having a good idea of what is core stuff, and what is, if it's a pull request that's contributing to core stuff, does that have a higher priority than here's a whole new set of features? Or or not. So having some kind of strategy around identifying what people are contributing and where it sits could help prioritize its importance.
But even if it's important or not important, I think it would be good if you could come up and any issue or PR is answered within 10 days or so and labeled, and so the one who submitted it knows someone looked at it, even and might say, oh, this is really off topic and it might take a long time, or
it should at least be acknowledged that it's, yes, we've seen it and we're thinking about it, kind of thing.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, we allocate time each week to a meeting and we're able to adhere to that. And I wonder if we could specify a particular time where reviewers would get together, partition out active pull requests, and then take a look at it or take some kind of responsibility for it. We just set a time in the week. I don't know if it's like Friday afternoon, and just say, okay, we got 3 pull requests and they've been sitting there for this many days and this many days. Like, how do we partition them up? Oh, that's good for you.
I can go along with that for sure. Maybe more like a bi-weekly thing. Doesn't have to be weekly, but we should definitely set up a time and do that. I agree. I'm down for it.
It kind of forces us to take responsibility as opposed to like meaning well.
Yeah, maybe just to add like a little bit of a like a thought or that or feeling is that even for our own stuff, like we can have like pull requests sitting there for weeks or even months, or at least some of mine does. And like, so for Xiaolong example, as a new contributors, I don't know if we want to say like, oh, for new contributors, we give them a high priority to introduce them faster, because like the fact that it's been here for weeks, at least for me, it's been something very usual on my PRs. That's like I can, yeah. So just the thoughts of like how you, if you treat like how you treat maybe new contributors on a priority level compared to the core team. I don't know, just a thought for that. But yeah, like definitely the PR things is like sometimes I like, because sometimes when it's been sitting here for like a few months, I'm even forgetting myself that I put a PR like 3 months ago and nobody looked at it.
So a while ago, I guess discretize was split out as a separate package. Is there any other, I guess, how has that worked in terms of, maintaining 2 things? And is that kind of something that could be done for other parts of SimPEG? I haven't really thought about it in any great detail, but is that kind of a strategy for, I guess I'm thinking of like core stuff versus new stuff again. Is there any of the core stuff that could become a separate thing?
Yeah, in general, I think so. I think at the end, and at the very extreme, SimPEG will be like our hope. I think our initial thought was SimPEG will be lightweight, a framework that doesn't really include many things, but you got some packages that you can just plug in, like a discretize, optimize, mapping, simulations. So down the road, that's the plan, I guess. I mean, I don't know. That's what I thought, in general.
Yeah, like I was thinking some of the core, like the optimization part, whether that, whether you can split the nuts and bolts of it out somewhere else or not.
Right, like that kind of like opens up the door for actually other disciplines to come, because like if the SimPEG is very overwhelming package of a lot of things, but if you speak like kind of break that apart to a few different things, then actually it's kind of much easier for other people to come and actually use it or contribute. So yeah, I thought in general that's a probably more healthier model.
And discretize is it's brilliant. I use it now, and other packages are going to use it because that's all this well, for me, good are the plotting functionalities. For other will be good all the edge curl internal computation it has, and it can be used easily because it's very lightweight. It has almost no dependencies, right?
Yeah.
What SciPy does and NumPy, they have domain specialists. So you would have one that is responsible for magnetics in SimPEG, one for DC, and if there is a pull request or a issue in this, you would kind of know who is probably going to look at it. That would be something we could think of, to have domain responsible people.
Dieter, do you know who those people are? Are they doing everything pro bono, or are they somehow paid to do this?
No, this I just know in SciPy, that's what I follow more. Basically, if you contribute a lot, you get into the core team, and usually a contributor mostly contributes to one linalg or optimize or the sparse, and they're then also there. And like I had in the FFT something open for years. Now they switched out all the things, but they had basically no one really strongly in the FFT for a long time, so nothing happened there because, yeah, it's if you have someone who knows the code. And it might happen with SimPEG too, because like SciPy, NumPy, I think they are so big that even a core contributor doesn't necessarily know all the parts of it, right? And that will probably be with SimPEG too, that someone knows a lot about the magnetics, but not about electromagnetics, for instance.
Yeah. So does having those in kind of separate packages make that easier then to maintain, if it's not part of some behemoth that very few people know the whole thing, but it consists of a lot of smaller parts?
Probably, right? But I don't think we don't have that much code, I don't think. I mean, it's pretty small right now, right? But I agree with you. Probably, Craig, yeah, I would think.
I'm not sure that I see like a breaking apart, like a separate simulation or problem down the road, because it's like a rather like a kind of more generic like part, like an optimized mapping. That types of stuff can be broken apart. But I don't know, like if SimPEG was really big, then I would think about actually breaking apart that simulation problem into a separate package. But I don't like, or in 5 years, I don't really see that kind of.
So I want to zoom out just a bit and sort of take a look again at these bullet points, and because I think these are really valuable discussions to have, but I want to make sure we don't get like too much into actually answering the question of like, what is the five-year roadmap? Because it's important, but a different conversation. So are there any other things here that you think that we should put on the table as like, we need governance to be able to do X? Or does this basically sum up the things? And we can always revisit this, but is there anything that's like standing out that's missing from this sort of big picture list?
The only thing, probably somebody should hook into the code of conduct, or not really. To deal with the unpleasant sides that we don't want to think of, but which could happen. That doesn't have to be in here, but somehow we have to link to it from the government, I guess.
Yep. Yes, and right now, for reference on that, we do have a code of conduct in SimPEG, and right now, Rowan and I are the points of contact for that. So if you email that, I think it's codefconduct@simpeg.xyz, that goes to myself and him. Okay. So I think perhaps the next thing, and we were actually sort of talking a bit about this, is kind of like, So what are the sort of semi-official roles we currently have? And then how does that maybe map to other governance models? What features do we want to look at? So this was sort of the breakdown when I was just kind of looking at roughly the folks who are engaged in the community. What do things kind of look like? So there's the people who started SimPEG, which I guess would be Rowan, Soggy, and myself in the early days. There's folks who are the admins. And so this is people who kind of have the keys to SimPEG in most of the places. So Rowan, myself, Joe, and Thibaut on GitHub have access to basically everything. Soggy's got access to the Google storage and all the Google side of things as well. And so this can obviously change, but like just currently stating who has permission to delete all the things, these people have permission to do that. Then this is where I think it like, these are a bit easier to sort of just like state based on, you know, who has permission to do stuff. These are of course sort of fuzzier definitions, but I think kind of maybe are somewhat reflective, but feel free to jump in if you think otherwise. So core contributors, I would say this is sort of people who contribute to the code, documentation, tutorials, community support, answering questions, onboarding people on a somewhat regular basis. And obviously that's loosely defined, but people who kind of show up and participate. And I don't mean that only by folks who like write code, because I think that that's a very narrow definition. I think somebody who spends time answering questions on discourse is doing just as much sort of valuable work for the community. I think there's some category of like core contributors that are, I've seen in the JOS world, they use the term emeritus. So people who have in the past contributed substantially to the project, but are sort of no longer on that day-to-day sort of regular participation. So folks like Rowan, Gutney, Dave and others. And then broadly sort of the community of people who use SimPEG in their work research, whether they're in touch with us or not, people who sort of periodically contribute, ask and answer questions on a less regular basis. Does that breakdown like resonate with folks? Are we missing categories of people? Silence, okay.
No, I think that's it, yeah.
Okay. Excellent. So I think, like, I guess.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So a pure user you would put on the community. There is no interaction needed.
Sorry?
The user base you would put on the community. The ones that just use it without any interaction, just read the docs.
That's fair. It might actually be worth broadening that. Yeah,
because that's a fair point right there. I mean, for instance, there's people that use SimPEG and they don't even know, you know, they run inversions, they don't even know that, you know, they don't care where it comes from. They're just running it. So there's like even like a higher level of abstraction.
Yeah, particularly when courses are given to students that the teacher uses SimPEG, the student might not be aware of anything. Yeah.
No, I think that's a good point and worth separating out, because the needs of that group is actually pretty distinct from the community and like somebody who is willing to reach out versus somebody who's not. Yeah, good point. Okay, so
Sorry guys, my Wi-Fi keeps failing, so
nice.
I just missed the last 10 minutes. That's good.
No worries. We were just sort of chatting through this this section here, Craig.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then maybe let's just take a brief look at like a few governance models we can chat. I mean, this is obviously, I've listed two. There's obviously more than this and like a lot more nuance depending on the project, but to give folks a flavor, and then feel free to jump in. I know Dieter's done a lot of looking at this and it would be useful to get your perspective from the SciPy side of things too. So like a couple of the common ones that you see in the Python open source world. So there's the BDFL model. And so I believe SciPy uses this. That's right, Dieter?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the point of this is not that like one person is the decision maker in all cases. It's much the benevolent part is meant to be that like decisions should be made sort of by the community. But if there is some scenario that arises where there is a deadlock and decisions are not sort of being made organically, this person is then meant to step in and make a decision. There's often sort of a steering council that's also associated with this. And so the idea being that the BDFL like consults with the steering council in general on discussions. And there's sort of that, like the steering council is meant to be helping sort of guide the direction of the project. But if there is a conflict that cannot be resolved, it's the job of the BDFL to do that. There's also examples that rely like entirely on a steering council. And so there's no one person who is like the final decision maker. So for example, Python has moved to more of this model where you have an odd number of people. And if like there is something where a decision needs to be made and consensus is not sort of being built by the community, the steering council votes and that's the decision. Thoughts?
That's fine by me. I mean, this is a matter of trust, right? And it's not like obviously it works and we all trust you, Lindsay. So you can be our dear leader. I vote you in.
I mean, in terms of the number of people involved, does one model work better if you've got like 100 people contributing versus a dozen?
For instance, Ubuntu has also that system, which is huge. But you never see, also in SciPy, actually the face you most often see is Ralph Gomers, you might see on GitHub or things, but he's not actually the BDFL. So it's not even the most visible person. It's maybe just the longest around or the most knowledgeable. For me, most projects with BDFL, they grow organically. So it's someone who is there almost from the beginning. And I think that's also why Python might think of switching now, as far as I understood, because, well, it used to be the creator and he kind of stepped down. And I guess it would be hard to crown a new king after all of the fuss around Python.
So then it becomes a steering committee. Is that the idea, Dieter?
I haven't heard of it, but Lindsay mentioned that they're moving away.
Yeah, I think it's now a 5-person steering council. And so I guess like some of the hesitation I have a bit with the BDFL model, but these are bigger projects. But so both Python and Jupyter are very much moving away from that, because the projects have gotten, in a sense, so big that no one person actually really like knows the landscape of the whole project anymore. And so like having that person sort of be responsible for decisions no longer works, and there's a lot of friction with that. And I think with the Python side of things, it completely burned Guido out. And I think part of that is that they perhaps didn't have the right structures of like who else is responsible for other things in place. And so like it sort of ended up defaulting that he was responsible for all the things, which is not a healthy situation to be in.
But you can easily also handle it that it's only the decision if the steering council has a PAT, right? So it's not a decision on the BFDL, it's just a deciding half a vote, or I don't know. That if there is a 2-2 or a 3-3, depending on how many people, and one doesn't want to vote, then yeah, I don't know.
I guess it puts a lot of heat on the BDFL, right? If that person makes a decision and people disagree or strongly angry at it, then it's all on one person.
Yeah,
it's probably emotionally hard.
Yeah, it's yeah, exactly. I would worry about like who do you want, like who does want to be BDFL? I mean, it's like a lot of pressure, but without too much return, I guess. So I don't know, like I wouldn't want to be a BDFL at all, I guess. So if there's anybody who wants to be a BDFL, we could go with it. But I don't know, like just a thought. It seems like having a council have multiple people and then sort of like responsible to a certain sector. And I'm not sure how we break that apart to a different sectors, but I think that seems like much, I don't know, like a healthier model, I guess. And for us, I'm not sure for others, but.
So one of the things that I don't know if anybody watched the Jupyter some of the talks from JupyterCon. Fernando and Brian gave a talk on governance, and I think there's a couple things that were quite interesting to me that sort of stood out as important learnings. Is the need to sort of separately consider how you recognize contributions, how you make technical and architectural decisions, and then how you sort of organize and like build positive community within the project. And so I actually think with any model that we pick, these are things to separate. So one of the things that happened is the steering council, for example, got so big with Jupyter that it became really tough to make decisions in a timely fashion. Like I think the steering council ended up being, or is currently like 17 or 18 people. And so responsibility becomes too diffuse. And like when you send out an email asking for a vote and opinions, like it's not happening in a timely fashion. And that's a bit of a problem. But it was in part it grew that big because it was basically like that was how recognition was handed out, is like if you contributed to the project for long enough, you were put on the steering council, and it just like ballooned. So I think that's something we want to be careful not to do. And that can happen if we choose a BDFL model, if we choose 5 people who are a steering council, it can happen either way. And so that's just something to be wary of. Yeah, I don't know if folks have other thoughts on that, things you would want to sort of see in place. Because I think like one of the things that, and where I came to sort of talking about titles and how people talk about what they do in SimPEG, is I think it's important to have like, sure, there can be a steering council, but it's also important to have the recognition of sort of responsibility and contribution also have a title associated with it, so that when you apply for a grant, when you apply for a job and you want to tell folks what you do with SimPEG, there's something that we agree on there. Yeah, so I don't know, what do folks think about?
What if we just determine who are the core contributors, and then every year or something, we just vote in the steering committee, and then just like a foundation or whatever, right? We just have a board basically, and then we vote in people that are gonna rule the landscape. Mm-hmm. Or no, just a thought. I think it would make sense for at least the core contributors to probably don't want everybody to decide who's running the show. We don't want to have like basically a massive bot, just computers voting in someone random. You know what I mean?
Yep, that's fair.
So do you want it to be limited to developers or people who are...
You can vote, Greg.
More like myself, who are on the user end of the spectrum.
For sure. Yeah. I'm just saying it would be great if the community, let's call it the community, votes in, I guess, a member, like a committee, and it probably will never change, probably always going to be the same people. But if someone drops out, if Sagi retires when he's too old, we have a way to be able to replace him.
Yeah, I think for sure, correct. Because I think there are a lot of like multiple parts that could help SimPEG to be used, and having opinion from user base, and then having a important applications that that can direct development in SimPEG could be quite important. So yeah, definitely, I guess.
I also think anything works as long as we clearly lay it out, because that's a bit the problem at the moment, right? It's not really clear how to get involved or who has to say, or yeah.
Okay. So we have like 10 minutes left. I don't know what the most, so okay, maybe we can chat through this like sketch of a breakdown, and then we can sit on it and write some more thoughts down and maybe regroup in a week or two and see if we can start to like sketch out something that kind of works. So what I tried to do here is kind of just sketch out like, what does SimPEG as an organization, what could it look like that in a way that sort of already jives with how we're operating? Because I don't think we want to like completely restructure how we do everything just because of this conversation. I mean, the decision making and all of that is, the project is moving forward and we haven't had any major problems. And so we don't want to disrupt something that's working, but put some more structure around that. So these are like a sketch of roles that I laid out, and titles that maybe make sense, maybe not. So I think the way things are kind of operating is like the idea of perhaps having somebody, and this is in a sense also similar to the way nonprofits kind of structure titles. The idea of a managing director, so somebody who's responsible for planning, organizing, laying out things like starting conversations around what is the 5-year roadmap, these kinds of things. And it's not that this person would be solely responsible for laying all of those things out, but they like wake up in the morning and that should be something that's on their radar when they come to the SimPEG meetings. Director of operations, and I guess right now I would see this primarily as kind of how Joe is operating, is, you know, somebody who's day-to-day overseeing how SimPEG is moving forward, making sure things are on track, pull reviews are getting reviewed, or pull requests are getting reviewed, releases are happening, that sorts of things. I mean, again, sort of reiterating that it's not this person's job to fix everything, but to delegate responsibility so that things stay in motion. So we mentioned sort of core contributors. And so I would say that somebody who's, you know, consistently investing time and effort in the project through any of software development, documentation, tutorials, participating in the community, asking a bunch of questions. So again, not restricted to code. And like roughly, I don't know, a week to week basis-ish. I mean, I don't think there's a hard cutoff. We should probably figure out how people get adopted into this role. Like what are a few metrics, and like, do we decide this every 6 months, every year, whatever. Within that, and I think this is perhaps kind of mirrors a bit of what Dieter was mentioning with the SciPy side of things, is potentially also having a domain lead designation. I don't know if that's the right title, but basically somebody who's like identified as the point person for a given method, for a given just like scoped chunk of SimPEG. And so that would then be like, there'd be, I guess, a bit of an expectation that, you know, people can come to you with questions. That doesn't mean you have to answer them all, but it has to means that you care that they get answered. And so this, I think, would basically be a bit of a way to sort of indicate responsibility that folks have within the community, be a title that you could take elsewhere. And yeah, And then I guess, yeah, something along the lines of the core, something to indicate for folks who have made a significant contribution but are no longer active, but to signal that. Okay, somebody added this. That's a cool idea. Is somebody who, you know, is taking responsibility for answering questions, and sort of being like a bit of a community point person. I quite like that idea. I don't know if somebody added that and wants to expand on that.
It was me.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, we want people to be answering the questions that show up in Discuss, and just kind of regularly check through for that kind of stuff. And then I kind of thought for a lot of things, like with UBC GIF or any other organization, there's generally some kind of parent email or something, some account, you know, info.simpeg@gmail.com or whatever it is. But if we get to be large enough and there's enough traffic, it would be nice to have a central place. Right now, we're kind of looking up individually, kind of looking through GitHub, who's pushing what, and trying to find the person to talk to in this group. It would be sort of nice to have a general question.
And it would be nice for the rest of us to not have to, you know, be forced to track all the communications. If you have some person that just poke you and you're like, hey, this is a question for you, go answer that guy, right? That would be awesome if someone can take that on.
Or what if there's a university that says, like, we're interested in having you come visit and talk about what you're doing. Just,
oh, I see. You want the trip. All right, Deb. Just kidding.
Well, and it doesn't have to be managed by one person. It could be managed by, you know, a few people who have access to the login for that. But for just general questions, it would make sense to say, I want to contact SimPEG and have it not go into a black hole.
That's a great idea, Deb. Cool. And then the last designation I sort of, we have written down here is if we do sort of pick a steering council model or a BDFL model, having some sort of steering council of folks who take a bit perhaps more responsibility on thinking through and sort of being a support person for people who like the community liaison, like the director of operations, and sort of take on an elevated responsibility for thinking about the community and strategy and be that deciding voice if we need it, if all other sort of decision-making methods fail, but their job first would be to try and build consensus among the community. So we have, we're almost up on the hour. I don't know if folks have like immediate thoughts you want to share or ideas for next steps for a next meeting.
Well, I have the feeling that in order to address all the other points that we're talking about, you know, like the vision, strategy, and all that stuff, we should have this committee already voted in.
Yep.
I would recommend that we just fix a meeting where we invite all the people that we want people to vote, and then we just elect, you know, raise hand and say, you do this, you're the chair, whatever, and then we just go from there. That would be my opinion.
That sounds good. So maybe one thing to do, because I think before we vote people into titles, we should make sure that these titles fit. And so let's maybe like over the next week or so, add your notes, thoughts, comments. If you see things that are missing, if you see things that you think are duplicates or whatever, let's try and sort of flesh that out. And maybe meet in a week. I don't know if that works for folks, or 2 weeks. I guess that's getting close to Christmas. Let's try for a week if that works. And then, yeah, basically kind of, I think, iron out like this chunk is like what does SimPEG governance kind of look like? And then we can go from there in terms of starting to sketch out more 5-year plans and poke people to be responsible for the different things. Does that work?
That works. Yeah. Can we not do it on the 10th? Can we do it on Friday? Can we meet up on Friday instead? Yeah.
Potentially. Yeah, I think that should work. Does that work for most folks here? Right, we can send around a quick poll, but if we did the same time on the 11th? Yeah.
Probably not too good for me, but I've joined in one, so you handle the other one.
I guess I take it back, Evans. If Thursday's fine, Thursday's fine for me too.
Oh, actually, I have a meeting, but I could move that one. Dieter, would Thursday work for you?
Thursday would work, yeah.
Okay, same time Thursday, I'm good.
Perfect. Okay, well, I'll send out a calendar invite and then we can just see if that doesn't work for anyone else, we'll do the calendar games, but we'll tentatively plan for that.
The calendar game, yeah.
Excellent. Cool. Thanks, everyone. I'm excited we're making some progress here. And yeah, feel free to add your notes, thoughts, and if you think that all of this was a terrible idea, feel free to also share that and get in touch.
And if not, then there's GeoSci.xyz, or what's the email you said?
I think it's code of conduct at SimPEG.
Code of conduct at SimPEG.
Yeah. There you go.
Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.